Hello and welcome to this video on the average rate of return, a form of investment appraisal. By the end of this video, we should be able to use the average rate of return to appraise investments, and we should be able to compare the usefulness of ARR, average rate of return, against payback. So a quick reminder, what do we mean by investments? Well, we mean strategic decisions with long-term consequences for a business, such as entering new markets, perhaps investing in new technology. Often this involves an initial capital outlay, spending money, and then a future financial reward or return that is attributable to that particular investment. So we're looking here at investment appraisal techniques, things that a business could do or approaches a business could take to assess whether they should do an investment or whether one investment would be preferable to another one. And we do that by assessing the forecast financial returns of the investment. And here we're going to look at our second one, which is called the average or accounting rate of return. A quick reminder that to do any of these three approaches, we need the following information. We need to know the capital cost of the investment, the yearly cash inflows from the investment, the yearly cash outflows from the investment project, and also how long the project is going to last. Me hearties. ARR stands for the average rate of return, which measures the overall profitability of an investment as a percentage of the initial investment cost. So let's again consider our example here of a robot that costs 60,000, the yearly running cost of 10,000, the yearly return is 30,000, and is expected to last for 5 years. A question might go, calculate the average or accounting rate of return. Again, what we have to do is put our figures into a table that tells us the cash in, the cash out, and the net cash flow. We can see the lifespan of the robot, and we can see the net cash flow from the robot. This is exactly the same information that we use to calculate the payback period. So let's start to calculate the average rate of return. What are the steps that we need to do or go through to be able to do this? Well, there are 4 steps we need to use. The first step is to add up the total forecasted return. So that's the net cash flow or the net profit. The second step is to take away the initial capital outlay. The third step is to divide the resulting figure by the expected life in the years of the investment. The fourth step is to calculate what percentage this is of the initial capital cost, and we do that using the formula below. The average rate of return equals the average annual return divided by the initial capital cost times 100. So let's go through for our robot again. This was the net cash flow figures that we had, and we can see the forecast returns here are 20,000 in each year, and the initial capital cost was 60,000. So step 1, add together the forecast returns. So we're careful here not to include year 0, but just the return. So 20,000, 20,000, 20,000, 20,000, 5 lots of that, 100,000. Okay, step 2, deduct the capital outlay from this figure. So we need to now deduct the 60,000. So our net total return is 40,000. Okay, that's kind of the net return that we're going to get from the project. Step 3, divide this figure by the expected life in years of the investment. Well, the investment, the robot, is forecast to last for 5 years. So we take our figure of 40,000 and we divide by 5. So we get 8,000. This is our kind of annual net return that we're going to get from our robot. One more step to go. Calculate what percentage this is of the initial capital cost. Using this formula, so average annual return divided by the initial capital cost. So that's 8,000 divided by 60,000 times 100 to put it into percentage. This gives us 13.3%. So the ARR, the average or accounting rate of return for this investment, is 13.3%. Right, let's have another quick go for our second robot here. Figures are slightly different. 80,000 is the initial capital cost, and then we get 30,000 back as a net cash flow in each of the 5 years of the robot's life. Quick reminder, these are our steps. And what I would like you to do now is pause the video and see if you can calculate the average rate of return for this robot. Well, let's see how you got on. Step 1, add together the forecasted returns. So the 5 lots of 30,000. Be careful not to include the initial capital cost. That gives us 150,000. Step 2, now we deduct the initial capital cost of the robot, 80,000, which gives us 70,000. Step 3, divide the resulting figure by the expected life. Gives us 14,000. So this is the average annual return. Divide that by the initial capital cost, and we get an ARR, average or accounting rate of return, for this investment of 17.5%. So what we're saying is kind of on a net basis, on average, this robot will pay back 17.5% of what it cost us to do for every year of its life. Now, why is this useful? Because firms can use the ARR result in 2 ways. First of all, they can set a predetermined level of return that they want on their investments within a particular year, say 15%, and then reject any project that when they do the forecast shows it's going to have an expected ARR less than this. Also, they can use it to make choices. So if we have a choice between 2 projects, we can rank them by their ARR and then select the project with the highest average rate of return. So in our example, the first robot had an ARR of 13.3%, and the second robot had an ARR of 17.5%. For me, I'm going to have to go for robot 2 because it has a higher average rate of return. So let's look at some of the advantages and disadvantages of this approach. Well, unlike payback, which has looked at how quickly the investment paid back the initial outlay, this approach looks at profitability. So it's looking at how profitable, how much money is generated from what we've spent on the project. And so this might link well with corporate objectives if they're particularly to do with profit maximization. Then we're really looking for a higher rate of return rather than those projects that just pay back quickly and maybe are less profitable. Secondly, it considers returns over the whole life of the project, which is beneficial if we're concerned with profitability, whereas payback only looks at how quickly or the short-term returns. So it ignores anything once the payback has been achieved. It's easy to compare this result with other business objectives, such as return on capital employed. So it gives us an idea of what percentage return we're getting on our assets and investments. Some disadvantages. It treats profits arising late in the project in the same way as those arising early. So if you ask most people, they would probably want a return to happen sooner rather than later. Now in this approach here, ARR won't tell us that. It just looks at the total return, not the timing of the return. And again, this could be problematic because cash inflows and outflows projected to be further in the future might be less reliable, maybe more uncertain than those outflows and inflows that we projected in the next couple of years, where we have more certainty over exactly what those figures are going to be. Lastly, if you have a business that values quick returns over long-term profitability, then this might be an issue and it might not work very well. So payback is likely to be the more important appraisal technique when a quick return is needed to maintain cash flow, or where the business is looking to really minimize the risk of losing money. ARR is likely to be a more important technique when the business has financial security and where forecasts can be made with a high degree of accuracy over the life of the investment. But these tools work most effectively when used together. Again, we have to bear in mind our investment appraisal doesn't take into account everything. For example, what are our objectives? How much does the project cost and do we have the finance? What are the risks associated with the projections of the cash flow that we've used? What will be the impact of this on the workforce? And lastly, are there any ethical or environmental considerations we need to take into account? So in this video, we should now be able to use the average rate of return to appraise investments, and we should be able to compare the usefulness of ARR versus payback. That's it. Thank you very much.